Sometimes it's just good to get away, to have some time to yourself, to enjoy a little privacy. It shouldn't be too hard to find, right? After all, if you think about it, the First Amendment gives us the privacy of our beliefs by protecting our freedom of speech. But do you feel like you have a private life when no one else is around? With advancements in technologies, you might be surprised to find out how little there is they don't already know about you. Have you ever wondered how some of the most advanced technologies, from Google to Siri to Facebook, are completely free? Well, maybe we're asking the wrong questions. Perhaps instead we should be asking why they're free. Or are they really free? After asking these questions, the world seen from this new viewpoint looks completely different.
Facebook is coming to Utah. The social media giant is building a $750 million data center in Eagle Mountain. News 4 Utah's Rick Aaron has more on the big announcement.
It's kind of hard to believe, but this desolate 490 acres of sagebrush in Eagle Mountain is about to become a high-tech data center for Facebook. The 970,000 square foot facility is the result of months of negotiations, and it's getting a big thumbs up from elected officials.
Well, it's win-win-win for everybody. The opportunity for us to increase economic expansion off the I-15 corridor is of significant, I think, benefit to us.
And this is about the future. As you also know that they have really young kids here, and it's about creating a place where people can live, thrive, work, play, and I'm really excited. I'm excited for not just Eagle Mountain, but the surrounding areas and what that's going to do for economic development.
It will take thousands of construction workers to build the campus, as Facebook calls it, plus at least 100 employees to run it.
And the jobs range on this campus from electricians, people who can run the facility, server technicians, network engineers, to culinary, security, and folks who have to run the campus.
The state offered a reported $150 million tax incentive to get Facebook to build here.
Well, keep in mind, we're not giving anything. What happens is people have to invest and create economic return, create tax revenue, and then we give some of that increased tax revenue back. So the taxpayers aren't giving anything to Facebook. They're just going to be able to save some of the money that they are spending and increase tax revenues. They grow the economic tax pie. They're going to be able to get some of that back after the fact.
It feels great, and we can't wait to get started. We're just thrilled to be here. We have a beautiful site. We have a great community, and we're excited to get going here.
Officials tell me that construction is scheduled to begin here immediately, and the facility should be online in 2020. In Eagle Mountain, Rick Aaron, News 4 Utah.
And Facebook will construct its own water infrastructure for the facility. It's also partnering with Rocky Mountain Power to create an electrical substation that's powered by renewable energy.
In November 2015, the National Security Agency lost the ability to directly hold information about the phone calls of millions of U.S. citizens. This was all thanks to the USA Freedom Act passed last summer. But don't get too comfortable. While the change is significant, the NSA can still collect and store your communication from the internet and social media. So all those selfies you've been taking and all those online chats with friends, yeah, the NSA may have them stored up somewhere. It's hard to say where they store them, but in the future they'll be stored here in these nondescript concrete buildings in the sleepy town of Bluffdale, Utah. We asked the NSA if they could show us around the complex, but were promptly turned down because the site is a secure facility. They may have understandably been a little spooked since Edward Snowden revealed all that spying on Americans that they were involved in.
The NSA data center is primarily server space, where they have large rooms with racks of servers.
That's Pete Ashton of X-Mission, an internet service provider in Salt Lake City. Before Snowden revealed massive spying by the NSA in 2013, Ashton was able to get a tour of what was inside those concrete buildings, and he may be one of the only people to talk about what he saw publicly.
What did you see? How did you even get an invitation to go?
X-Mission is part of Utah Data Center Consortium, which was started by an individual at the University of Utah. University of Utah, of course, has their own data center, and they wanted to get people together to share ideas and best practices. The Data Center Consortium includes University of Utah, eBay, Oracle, and it also includes the NSA. And I think the NSA participates, just to be friendly and probably to recruit, because whenever there's a thing at the University of Utah where we're talking data centers, they go up and they want to talk to the students to tell them what they do and what a great job it is to work for the NSA. So they made that invitation in fall of 2012, and I'd heard it was a great facility and I wanted to check it out.
So you walk in, and what do you walk around and see on this tour?
It was still under construction at that point, and I saw a lot of people pulling cable. They loaded us into a van and drove us around. First we saw the facility kind of like from above, and they pointed out how it's divided into two facilities that are redundant with each other. The questions they would answer were very banal, but we were able to calculate the capacity just by counting the generators. Each of those generators was like a 2 megawatt generator, and they had over 30 of them, I think.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of power.
It is a huge amount of power. I think a megawatt can service 1,000 homes.
The tour guide said that one of the reasons they wanted to build the data center in Utah was because of the patriotism of people from Utah.
Yeah, that was one of my questions is, why did you come here? And his response was, the electricity is cheap and the people are patriotic. And I read that as a code word, is that nobody's gonna ask any questions. And that kind of sat with me uneasily, that in my opinion, patriotism is questioning your government consistently. The idea that we're just sheep out here and we're not going to care, I think is, even though we're a very conservative state, I think a lot of people would bristle at that idea.
Okay, so they put the pillowcase back on your head and you leave the facility. What did you think after leaving the facility? What mulled in your head?
I'd always heard the myths that the NSA could read hard drives and crack all encryptions, and I asked them about that and they just kind of laughed that off. But as the days went on and I thought more about the facility and I thought more about what Mark Klein had revealed in 2004. He revealed that in the AT&T data center in the Bay Area that the NSA had an intercept room where all the data flowing through AT&T at that point was going in, and nobody knew what was going on inside. Now, that was something else that was interesting about the tour, is I asked, well, where's your internet connection? Do you have a connection to the internet at all? And they said, this building is not connected to the internet. So they have intercept points around the country that I think they pull data off of those intercept points and put them on their own private network. They definitely have fiber going into that building, but I think it's completely air-gapped from the internet. I started to realize that it's just a data collection point, that they're collecting and storing as much data off the internet and telephone networks that they can. And they think that if you ask for a warrant later to look at the data, that's okay.
Even with everything that Snowden revealed, do you think that the average American really understands bulk data collection from the NSA?
Absolutely not. I think it's a very hard thing for most Americans to understand exactly that their data is being intercepted and stored. And a lot of people would say, well, I'm not a criminal, I don't have a problem with it. Well, the thing you have to realize is you may not be a criminal, but giving that data to other people and trusting them with it, there could be criminals on the other side. If you trust the government is going to do the right thing, I think you're alone in that respect.
I was breaking different codes and data systems and doing data analysis against the Soviet Union. After 9/11, they took one of the programs I had done, or the back end part of it, and started to use it to spy on everybody in this country. So that was a program they created called Stellar Wind. That was separate and compartmented from the regular activity that was ongoing, because it was doing domestic spying. All the equipment was coming in, I knew something was happening, but then when the contractors I had hired came and told me what they were doing, it was clear where all the hardware was going and what they were using it to do. It was simply a different input. Instead of being foreign, it was domestic input.
Somebody told me that they can listen to what we're saying by my having this, even if it's turned off.
Yes. Here's the real grand design. Every domain, think of a domain as an activity, a specific type of activity. Phone calls, or banking is another domain. So if you think of graphing each domain, and then each graph then turning it in the third dimension, the trick now is to map through all the domains in that third dimension, pulling together all the attributes that any individual has in every domain, so that now I can pull your entire life together from all those domains and map it out and show your entire life over time.
Why you're not afraid?
Why should I be?
I don't, because if what you're saying it was possible, it would be revolutionary and people would have a vested interest in preventing that from happening.
I'm too old to be afraid. I'm too old.
I'm not sure how many of you got a chance to hear Keith Alexander yesterday, the head of the NSA, talk about the NSA's activities. Bill, how do you reconcile, is there some way to reconcile General Alexander's statement that the NSA isn't keeping track of every American with the existence of a facility like the one in Utah?
NSA's charter, and it was a legitimate one, was to do foreign intelligence, and I was with that all the way, and I did the best I could in that job. Unfortunately, they took those programs that I built and turned them on you, and I'm sorry for that. I didn't intend that, but they did that.
What you're describing really is hard to reconcile with the laws as the laws are generally understood by the lawyers who work with them.
Most people are familiar with the Webster's definition of intercept. UCIT 18 has a different definition, and that's an intercept doesn't take place until it's actually listened to, until somebody puts on some earphones or actually reads some text on a screen. So you can pull in all the communications you want.
The acquisition isn't the search. The querying later on is the search. They can then keep it in their database and target after the fact by going back and conducting data mining searches afterward, in other words, to get the information that they couldn't target from the outset.
And there is another real problem. Unfortunately, the software will, once it takes in data, it will build profiles on everybody in that data. The purpose is to monitor, be able to monitor what people are doing. You build social networks for everybody. That then turns into the graph, and then you index all that data to that graph, which means you can pull out a community that gives you an outline of the life of everybody in the community. And if you carry it over time from 2001 up, you have that 10 years worth of their life that you could lay out in a timeline that involves anybody in the country. Even senators and House of Representatives, all of them. The dangers here are that we fall into something like a totalitarian state like East Germany. Well, they came in guns drawn, you know, in my house. They didn't do that to the others, but they did to me. I guess, I don't know, they thought I was probably the most dangerous of all, so I don't know. I don't know what was in their minds, okay? So, but they did that, and they came in and pointed the gun at me when I was getting out of the shower at the time, so they pointed a gun right at my old head, you know, and said, hey. So, I wasn't too upset. I just said, yeah, suppose I could get dressed here. You know, they weren't intimidating me anyway, so. Tell me something that will implicate somebody in a crime, that's what they asked me. So I told them what the crime was that I knew about, and that was that George Bush, Dick Cheney, Tenet, and Hayden conspired to subvert the Constitution and constitutional process and any number of laws, and here's how they did it, and I explained Stellar Wind on my back porch to all the FBI agents who weren't cleared. So they had a problem. I created a problem for them because they had a bunch of people now who weren't cleared for a very highly classified, only because it was domestic spying, by the way, was the reason it was highly classified. You know, they wanted to highly classify the extreme impeachable crimes that they were committing. It needs to be out in the open. We need to, as a democracy, we need to say, do we want our government doing this or not? And do we want our government to have this data or not? And if so, if we want them to have it, then what kind of controls? And they have to be a little bit more visible. It can't all be done in secret. You can't have secret interpretations of laws and run them in secret and not tell anybody. Or can't make up kill lists and not tell anybody what the criteria is for being in the kill list. This is something the KGB, the Stasi, or the Gestapo would have loved to have had about their populations. So, I mean, you know, and just because we call ourselves a democracy, right, doesn't mean we will stay that way. That's the real danger. And we, the people, may have absolutely nothing to say about it. We haven't had anything to say so far.
Are you aware at all of the current state of surveillance and what, if anything, has changed since your revelations?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing that's changed since I was in 2013 is now it's mobile first everything. Mobile was still a big deal, right? And the intelligence community was very much grappling to get its hands around it and to deal with it. But now people are much less likely to use a laptop than use a desktop than use, you know, God, any kind of wired phone, than they are to use a smartphone. And both Apple and Android devices, unfortunately, are not especially good in protecting your privacy. Think right now. You got a smartphone, right? You might be listening to this on a train somewhere in traffic right now. Or you, Joe, right now. You got a phone somewhere in the room, right? The phone is turned off, or at least the screen is turned off. It's sitting there. It's powered on. And if somebody sends you a message, the screen blinks to life. How does that happen? Right? How is it that if someone from any corner of the earth dials a number, your phone rings and nobody else's rings? How is it that you can dial anybody else's number and only their phone rings, right? Every smartphone, every phone at all, is constantly connected to the nearest cellular tower. Every phone, even when the screen is off, you think it's doing nothing, you can't see it because radio frequency emissions are invisible. It's screaming in the air, saying, here I am, here I am. Here is my IMEI, I think it's Individual Manufacturer's Equipment Identity, and IMEI, Individual Manufacturer's Subscriber Identity. I could be wrong on the breakout there, but the acronyms are the IMEI and the IMSI, and you can search for these things. They're two globally unique identifiers that only exist anywhere in the world in one place, right? This makes your phone different than all the other phones. The IMEI is burned into the handset of your phone. No matter what SIM card you change to, it's always going to be the same, and it's always going to be telling the phone network it's this physical handset. Then the IMESI is in your SIM card, right? And this is what holds your phone number, right? It's basically the key, the right to use that phone number. And so your phone is sitting there doing nothing, you think, but it's constantly shouting and saying, I'm here. Who is closest to me? That's a cell phone tower. And every cell phone tower with its big ears is listening for these little cries for help and going, all right, I see Joe Rogan's phone, right? I see Jamie's phone. I see all these phones that are here right now. And it compares notes with the other network towers, and your smartphone compares notes with them to go, who do I hear the loudest? And who you hear the loudest is a proxy for proximity, for closeness, distance, right? They go, whoever I hear more loudly than anybody else, that's close to me. So you're going to be bound to this cell phone tower, and that cell phone tower is going to make a note, a permanent record, saying this phone handset with this phone number at this time was connected to me, right? And based on your phone handset and your phone number, they can get your identity, right? Because you pay for this stuff with your credit card and everything like that. And even if you don't, right, it's still active at your house overnight. It's still active, you know, on your nightstand when you're sleeping. It's still whatever. the movements of your phone are the movements of you as a person, and those are often quite uniquely identifying. It goes to your home, it goes to your workplace. Other people don't have it, sorry. And anyway, it's constantly shouting this out, and then it compares notes with the other parts of the network. And when somebody is trying to get to a phone, it compares notes, the network compares notes to go, where is this phone with this phone number in the world right now? And to that cell phone tower that is closest to that phone, it sends out a signal saying, we have a call for you. Make your phone start ringing so your owner can answer it. And then it connects it across this whole path. But what this means is that whenever you're carrying a phone, whenever the phone is turned on, there's a record of your presence at that place that is being made and created by companies. It does not need to be kept forever, and in fact, there's no good argument for it to be kept forever, but these companies see that as valuable information, right? This is the whole big data problem that we're running into, and all this information that used to be ephemeral, right? Where were you when you were 8 years old, you know? Where'd you go after you had a bad breakup? You know, who'd you spend the night with? Who'd you call after? All this information used to be ephemeral, meaning it disappeared, right? Like the morning dew, it would be gone. No one would remember it. But now these things are stored. Now these things are saved. It doesn't matter whether you're doing anything wrong. It doesn't matter whether you're the most ordinary person on Earth, because that's how bulk collection, which is the government's euphemism for mass surveillance, works. They simply collect it all in advance in hopes that one day it will become useful. And that was just talking about how you connect to the phone network. That's not talking about all those apps on your phone that are contacting the network even more frequently, right? How do you get a text message notification? How do you get an email notification? How is it the Facebook knows where you're at? You know, all of these things, these analytics, they are trying to keep track through location services on your phone, through GPS, through even just what wireless access points you're connected to, because there's a global, constantly updated map. There's actually many of them of wireless access points in the world, because just like we talked about, every phone has a unique identifier that's globally unique. Every wireless access point in the world, right? Your cable modem at home, whether it's in your laptop, every device that has a radio modem has a globally unique identifier in it. This is a standard term. You can look it up. And these things can be mapped when they're broadcasting in the air, because again, like your phone says to the cell phone tower, I have this identifier. The cell phone tower responds and says, I have this identifier. And anybody who's listening, they can write these things down. And all those Google Street View cars that go back and forth, right? They're keeping notes on whose Wi-Fi is active on this block, right? And then they build it into a giant map. So even if you have GPS turned off, right? As long as you're connected to Wi-Fi, those apps can go, well, I'm connected to Joe's Wi-Fi, but I can also see his neighbor's Wi-Fi here, and the other one in this apartment over here, and the other one in the apartment here. And you should only be able to hear those 4 globally unique Wi-Fi access points from these points in physical space, right? The intersection in between the spreads, the domes of all those wireless access points. And it's a proxy for location. And it just goes on and on and on. We could talk about this for 4 more hours. We don't have that kind of time.
Can I ask you this? Is there a way to mitigate any of this personally? I mean, shutting your phone off doesn't even work, right?
Well, so it does in a way. It's yes and no. The thing with shutting your phone off that is a risk is, how do you know your phone's actually turned off? It used to be, when I was in Geneva, for example, working for the CIA, we would all carry like drug dealer phones. The old smartphones, old dumb phones, they're not smartphones. And the reason why was just because they had removable backs where you could take the battery out, right? And the one beautiful thing about technology is if there's no electricity in it, right? If there's no go juice available to it, if there's no battery connected to it, it's not sending anything, because you have to get power from somewhere. You have to have power in order to do work. But now your phones are all sealed, right? You can't take the batteries out. So there are potential ways that you can hack a phone where it appears to be off, but it's not actually off. It's just pretending to be off, whereas in fact it's still listening in and doing all this stuff. But for the average person, that doesn't apply, right? And I got to tell you guys, they've been chasing me all over the place. I don't worry about that stuff, right? And it's because if they're applying that level of effort to me, they'll probably get the same information through other routes. I am as careful as I can, and I use things like Faraday cages. I turn devices off. But if they're actually manipulating the way devices display, it's just too great a level of effort, even for someone like me, to keep that up on a constant basis. Also, if they get me, I only trust phones so much. So there's only so much they can derive from the compromise. And this is how operational security works. You think about what are the realistic threats that you're facing, that you're trying to mitigate. And the mitigation that you're trying to do is what would be the loss, what would be the damage done to you was exploited. Much more realistic than worrying about these things that I call voodoo hacks, right? Which are like next level stuff. And actually, just a shout out for those of your readers who are interested in this stuff. I wrote a paper on this specific problem. How do you know when a phone is actually off? How do you know when it's actually not spying on you? With a brilliant, brilliant guy named Andrew Bunny Huang. He's an MIT PhD in, I think, electrical engineering. Called the Introspection Engine that was published in the Journal of Open Engineering. You can find it online. And it'll go as deep down in the weeds, I promise you, as you want. We take an iPhone 6, this was back when it was fairly new, and we modified it so we could actually not trust the device to report its own state, but physically monitor its state to see if it was spying on you. But for average people, right, this is academic. That's not your primary threat. Your primary threats are these bulk collection programs. Your primary threat is the fact that your phone is constantly squawking to these cell phone towers that's doing all of these things because we leave our phones in a state that is constantly on. You're constantly connected, right? Airplane mode doesn't even turn off Wi-Fi really anymore. It just turns off the cellular modem. But the whole idea is we need to identify the problem. And the central problem with smartphone use today is you have no idea what the hell it's doing at any given time. Like, the phone has the screen off. You don't know what it's connected to. You don't know how frequently it's doing it. Apple and iOS, unfortunately, makes it impossible to see what kind of network connections are constantly made on the device and to intermediate them, going, I don't want Facebook to be able to talk right now. You know, I don't want Google to be able to talk right now. I just want my secure Messenger app to be able to talk. I just want my weather app to be able to talk. But I just checked my weather, and now I'm done with it, so I don't want that to be able to talk anymore. And we need to be able to make these intelligent decisions on not just an app-by-app basis, but a connection-by-connection basis, right? You want, let's say you use Facebook, because, you know, for whatever judgment we have, a lot of people might do it. You want it to be able to connect to Facebook's content servers. You want to be able to message a friend. You want to be able to download a photograph or whatever, but you don't want it to be able to talk to an ad server. You don't want it to talk to an analytics server that's monitoring your behavior, right? You don't want it to talk to all these third-party things because Facebook crams their garbage into almost every app that you download, and you don't even know what's happening because you can't see it, right? And this is the problem with the data collection use today, is there is an industry that is built on keeping this invisible. And what we need to do is we need to make the activities of our devices, whether it's a phone, whether it's a computer, whatever, more visible and understandable to the average person, and then give them control over it. So, like, if you could see your phone right now, and at the very center of it is a little green icon that's your, you know, handset, or it's a picture of your face, whatever, and then you see all these little spokes coming off of it. That's every app that your phone is talking to right now, or every app that is active on your phone right now, and all of the hosts that it's connecting to. And you can see right now, once every 3 seconds, your phone is checking into Facebook, and you could just poke that app, and then boom, it's not talking to Facebook anymore. Facebook's not allowed. Facebook's speaking privileges have been revoked, right? You would do that. We would all do that. If there was a button on your phone that said, do what I want, but not spy on me, you would press that button, right? That button does not exist right now. And both Google and Apple, unfortunately, Apple's a lot better at this than Google, but neither of them allow that button to exist. In fact, they actively interfere with it because they say it's a security risk. And from a particular perspective, they actually aren't wrong there. But it's not enough to go, we have to lock that capability off from people because we don't trust they would make the right decisions. We think it's too complicated for people to do this. We think there's too many connections being made. Well, that is actually a confession of the problem right there. If you think people can't understand it, if you think there are too many communications happening, if you think there's too much complexity in there, it needs to be simplified. Just like the president can't control everything like that, if you have to be the president of the phone, and the phone is as complex as the United States government, we have a problem, guys. This should be a much more simple process. It should be obvious. And the fact that it's not, and the fact that we read story after story, year after year, saying all your data has been breached here, this company's spying on you here, this company's manipulating your purchases, or your search results, or they're hiding these things from your timeline, or they're influencing you or manipulating you in all of these different ways, that happens as a result of a single problem. And that problem is an inequality of available information. They can see everything about you, they can see everything about what your device is doing, and they can do whatever they want with your device. You, on the other hand, owned the device.